Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today we will be continuing with the French Revolution by Oversimplified. This is part 2 of 2, so if you haven't seen the first part, I highly recommend you check it out. I will include a link to that down in the description below. I will also include a link to the original content down in the description below. Please consider heading over to Oversimplified and showing them a little love and support if you like what you see here. Alright, with that said, we will from here on out be doing Oversimplified Saturdays. So we'll be finishing off the French Revolution today, and we'll be starting into the Oversimplified Napoleonic videos next week. At the same time, I have also started French Fridays. I've had a lot of requests to go through Epic History's Napoleonic era videos. We'll be doing those on Fridays. I posted the very first one yesterday on the Siege of Toulon. If you're interested in this period of history, the French Revolution, the Napoleonic era, I would encourage you to check that out. And I will include a link to that one as well in the description. Alright, with all that said, I've made this disclaimer before, I'll make it again. I am not very strong on French history, nor am I strong on Napoleonic stuff. I do know a little bit more about the French Revolution than other aspects of French history, but my emphasis tends to be more on other aspects of it than the military and the political. And specifically, I get into things like food shortages, how they deal with them, that kind of thing. So, but I think I can add quite a bit. This is oversimplified. They do tend to oversimplify things. So hopefully, I feel like I contributed something to this discussion. So let's just get into it and let's see what they've got and see what we can learn.
King Louis and his family were now in the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where for the next couple of years, he watched as the revolutionary government began to strip away his power. And fearing for his safety, he had to stay on their good side. Hey, look who it is. It's my favorite revolutionaries. Yep, I'm your #1 fan. What can I do for you? Hey, King Louis. So we've made a few decisions. First, all of your friends in the nobility are going to have to pay taxes the same as everyone else. Great idea. I love it. And as a side note, the tax money can no longer pay for all your lavish parties. Great. I hate those parties. They're so awkward. And also, we're taking away your Porsche. Oh, come on!
I'm fairly sure King Louis didn't have a Porsche. However, the message here is fairly clear. They have curtailed the power of the king. They are cracking down on the special rights of the nobility, and they're also going to take on the clergy during this period. And we're about to get to the point where we get into the terror, and things are about to turn ugly.
I mean, yay. The king continually found demand after demand being made of him to prove his support for the revolution. On one occasion, a mob would invade the palace and demand he wear the revolutionary bonnet. This is the face of a man who is definitely pretending he wants to wear that bonnet. Now around here, I want to mention that one thing King Louis had a problem with was people constantly raiding his palace. But one thing he didn't have a problem with was raiding noobs on this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow...
This is an older video, so we're going to skip the sponsor. Alright, let's continue.
Now where was I? Oh yeah. Seeing the situation rapidly turning against him, the king decided it might be a good idea to leave France and mount a campaign to retake his country from abroad. Luckily for him, he was married to an Austrian. So on the night of June 20th, 1791, the king and his family disguised themselves as servants and attempted to flee to the Austrian Netherlands. The royal carriage made a stop in the town of Varennes, and the postmaster there was like, "Hey guys, what's up? Where are you off to? We are but a collection of inconspicuous servants heading for the border for no particular reason at all." Say, you, the fat one, you look kind of familiar. Aren't you the king? Nope. Let me see your passport. It says here you're King Louis the 16th. Nope, not me. Take him away, boys. The king...
Yeah, so he almost makes it. Unfortunately, he does get stopped. He does get recognized. I've heard, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I've heard he was actually recognized because of his image on the money.
Was promptly returned to Paris, but now the jig was up. His lack of support for the revolution was clear to all, and many considered him a straight-up traitor who tried to abandon his people. As a
It was a big mistake because this just made him look even less like somebody they could trust. Now, things may have almost certainly would have turned against him anyway, but this certainly didn't help, especially in the eyes of the common people.
Result, the new Constitution of 1791 completely reduced his powers to that of a simple figurehead, a constitutional monarch. However, radicals, such as those in the Jacobin Club, were outraged that the king wasn't to be removed entirely. So a month later, these radicals staged a protest on the Champ de Mars, calling for the king's removal. The government of Paris feared an insurrection was mounting, and they sent the military to disperse the crowd. The confrontation escalated and resulted in the Revolutionary National Guard firing on a crowd of revolutionaries. It was a massacre. The incident exposed a deep division within the Brotherhood of the Revolution. On one side, the moderates who wanted to keep the king as a figurehead. On the other, radicals who wanted to see the king deposed and heads roll. In the wake of the massacre, these radicals received a wave of support. And speaking of rolling heads, one form of equality the revolution introduced was equality in execution. This meant no more torturous drawing and quartering, no more inhumane hanging. They wanted all criminals, regardless of economic status, to receive the same penalty, a quick...
Yeah, and that's actually kind of an important distinction to make here, because there is a lot of points in history and in various cultures where different classes would have different punishments. Where one class, like the poor, might be hung or drawn and quartered or whatever, the nobles might be quickly executed by beheading. This is going to change here because one execution fits all. Doesn't matter your social standing.
And painless one. Luckily, a man by the name of Dr. Joseph Guillotine had an idea. A heavy blade that falls like thunder. The head flies off, blood spurts, and the man is no more. The guillotine, otherwise known as the national razor. The guillotine made its debut in 1791 as the new form of execution.
Partially true. The guillotine was first presented in 1791. It wasn't actually used until 1792. The first man executed, if I'm remembering correctly, was a highwayman.
The writings of Marat and others continued to call for the execution of anyone suspected of working against the revolution. For him, this included some members of the clergy and nobility who had previously benefited from the cruel system of inequality that existed before the revolution. In many parts of the countryside, local lords had found themselves become a target. Sire, the peasants, they're revolting. Oh, come on, that's a bit harsh. Sure, they smell a bit, but I wouldn't say they're revolting. Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Increasingly, these French aristocrats began fleeing France to find solitude in other parts of Europe. And once again, fear began to take hold. The privileged classes of these foreign nations didn't like what they were seeing because they feared revolutionary ideas may spread to their own lands. The nationalists...
Yeah, that's a big concern at this time. You've already had recently, not one, but basically two countries rebel against their rightful rulers. The United States with the American Revolution, and the Haitians in the Haitian Revolution, where they overthrow their leaders and declare themselves an independent nation. Now France is starting to do it, and France is a big deal because this isn't some colony way over there across the ocean. This is right here at home in Europe, and this is a powerful nation. If they can get rid of their monarchy, what's going to happen to our monarchy? So places like Britain, Austria, all these other monarchies around France are getting concerned. Spain also, because this is not something you want spreading, the kind of idealism, and it appears to be. The Americans started, the Haitians follow, now France is following. Where's it going to stop? That's a growing concern. And it doesn't help that right around this period, in fact, I believe it's 1793, that Poland essentially, the monarchy there collapses as Poland is partitioned between Prussia and Russia. So this is not a good time to be monarch. You're probably very scared at this time.
Assembly, actually now the Legislative Assembly, feared that these nations may decide to attack. Then why don't we attack them first? No, you idiots, we are definitely not ready for war yet. Did somebody say something? France declared war on Austria in April 1792 and immediately got pummeled. It also didn't help that Austria's ally, Prussia, joined in the fighting. The Prussian Duke of Brunswick posted a letter warning the revolutionaries that if anything happened to the king, he would burn Paris to the ground. The Duke's letter proved to be a massive success.
Yeah, no. I know what he's going to say in making everybody mad, because that's exactly what this does. This just makes the revolutionaries more angry.
Inspiring the people of Paris to do the exact opposite of what he intended. They were enraged by the threat, and on the 10th of August 1792, the tension in the city exploded, and a mob stormed the king's palace. Fighting broke out between the revolutionaries and the king's Swiss guard, with casualties in the hundreds. King Louis fled and took refuge in the chamber of the Legislative Assembly, where Robespierre and his radical Jacobins were gaining ever more power. Given the developing situation, the chamber decided to hold a vote, and in what some considered to be a second revolution, it was decided to suspend the monarchy entirely. King Louis XVI was now just plain old Louis, and he was sent to a prison cell where an eye could be kept on him. A month later, the newly established National Convention officially declared the French Republic, and society underwent a massive change. Enlightened ideas of democracy and equality were being implemented, but very quickly, these ideas seemed to become secondary to fear, paranoia, and a thirst for blood. The new republic began working to violently remove any semblance of the old royalist regime. The church became a prime target. Priests who refused to take an oath to the revolution were deported or arrested. A new state-sponsored atheistic religion named the Cult of Reason was created as a replacement for the Catholic Church.
And the Cult of Reason is going to evolve, continue to evolve during this period. Later, you're going to get the Cult of the Supreme Being, with Robespierre as the figurehead. And this is a Enlightenment-inspired movement. It's a deistic movement, and it grows increasingly deistic as it progresses. The basic idea that Robespierre wants is he doesn't want an atheist society, because he still believes that there is a role for religion in morality. But he also doesn't want a clergy that's separate from the government. He doesn't want a clergy at all. And when we talk about deism, a deistic religion, what we're really talking about is a faith in a supreme being like God, if you're a Christian, or any of the Abrahamic religions. You believe in some kind of a supreme being that is a creator. He creates the universe, he sets up the laws of the universe, and then he lets those laws run the universe. He does not step in and intervene. He made the place, he set up the rules, you're on your own. It keeps the idea of a creator God, but it gets rid of the idea of miraculous interventions, if you want to look at it that way. There were a lot of deists around this time. For sure, a couple of the founding fathers were deists, and probably more than just a couple were. Jefferson would be a good example. Thomas Jefferson was very much a deist. Madison probably was. But yeah, Jefferson famously created the Jefferson Bible, where he went through the Bible and cut out all the miraculous parts because he believed in the message. He believed in the idea of a God that creates and sets up rules and structure, but he doesn't necessarily accept the miraculous end of it. And that's kind of deism in a nutshell. So just picture a God that creates the world, sets up the laws, and says, you've got the laws, including the laws of physics and all that, and it's all up to you now. I've got better things to do now. I got other things to do. So that's kind of a deistic look at things. And it comes straight out of the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment. Because this, by looking at things in a deistic sense, the universe makes sense. It's been created, there are laws and rules, they make sense, they're not changing. God doesn't come in and tweak this one for your benefit, let alone anybody else's benefit. It is what it is, so shall it be.
Dam, along with many other churches, had their religious treasures destroyed and were converted to temples of reason. Even the Christian calendar didn't survive, as a brand new revolutionary calendar was soon introduced. Hey honey, I'm home. Yeah, whatever, jerk. Whoa, what's wrong with you? You forgot. Forgot what? Everything. This entire year. My birthday was on the 3rd of Germinal, our anniversary was the 12th of Thermidor, and you promised that in Frimaire, we'd go on a romantic weekend trip to Venice. No, I said we'd do that in December. December hasn't been a thing for years.
Yep.
The government of...
They did do that. They completely changed the calendar. They tried to divorce it from religious connotations. So we're not going to be doing the whole Anno Domini thing. They tried to change the name to get away again from religious or mythical connotations. They basically just tried to change everything. They did try to make it make more sense by using a decimal system. I'll give them that. But yeah, it was a chaotic time to be alive in France. Imagine with all these other things going on, a change in government, people being executed left and right. That's not really taken off yet, but it's about to. Everything is changing. The religion is changing. The names of the years, the months, the days of the week, all of that is changing.
Paris, now under the control of the radical sans-culottes, began rounding up suspected enemies of the revolution and sending them to prison in the thousands. Naturally, a large number of those arrested were members of the clergy and aristocracy. As France's foreign enemies continued to close in, panic spread. Georges Danton made impassioned calls for men to defend the Republic, and tens of thousands of troops left Paris for the front lines. However, in their absence, Paris was left to its own devices. As enemy troops arrived in Verdun, the people of Paris feared that their crowded prisons were becoming a breeding ground for counter-revolutionary conspiracy. What would happen if the Prussians reached Paris and freed the aristocrats?
Right.
Marat believed he knew what would happen. The aristocrats would enact their vengeance on the people. Fearing those they had already imprisoned, mobs descended on Paris's prisons. They broke in, and during the brutal September massacres, aristocrats, priests, and others were tried and executed on the spot. Even women and children weren't spared. With over 1,600 victims, word of the massacre spread across Europe. One British newspaper wondered, are these the rights of man? Is this the liberty of human nature? But there was still one man in particular that Robespierre and his radicals really wanted to see executed. Austria and Prussia pledged that after they defeated France, they'd return King Louis to the throne. Well, checkmate Austria and Prussia, because you can't return a man to the throne if he's already dead. Citizen Louis Capet was...
I don't know if you can say that. There have been examples of kings ruling after they're dead, or autocrats ruling after dead. In fact, there's one example in place today in a country that some people describe as a necropacy, a country led by a dead man. Bonus points to those who know which country I'm talking about.
Put on trial for treason. Obviously, he was found guilty, but his punishment was less certain. Many moderates wanted to simply deport him, but Robespierre insisted the revolution could only live if the king was dead. A vote was held, and by just one vote, Louis was sentenced to the guillotine. If you don't mind...
Think of what might have happened in history had that one vote been different. He goes to his death by one vote. That is got to be really frustrating for Louis. I'm sure he had other things on his mind at the time, but one vote. That vote had gone the other way. Theoretically, Louis is spared. I kind of doubt that would actually happen. I suspect that had it gone the other way, there's probably still would have been a movement to execute him. They would have just found another excuse.
I'd like to say a few words first. Gentlemen, I am innocent of everything of which I am accused. Wait, you're too loud. They can't hear me. Hang on, I haven't finished yet. Wait, dude. Uncool. In her prison cell, Marie Antoinette heard the guns fire, signaling her husband's death. Before long, she would meet the same fate. Back on the war front, France defied all expectations and actually managed to push the enemy back. But then more countries joined the coalition against France, and it all went to pot again. What do? Conscript the masses. The National Convention introduced a conscription law, with each regional department having to meet a certain quota of men for the army. However, Not everyone was happy with this new law.
Of course
You see,
not.
While Paris was definitely a hotbed for radical revolutionary fervor, some of the regions outside of Paris weren't quite so keen on the revolution. Some were largely still conservative, still supported the church, and just didn't suffer from that much inequality before the revolution. So as the revolution turned increasingly violent and anti-Christian, many were outraged. Now, they were being conscripted to fight for the new republic they hated. That was the last straw. Counter-revolutionary
All right.
uprisings erupted in a number of regions across France. Some would last for years, such as in the northwest, where a large-scale uprising was led by the Owls. Why were they called the Owls? Because their leader was named Jean Owl. Why was he called Jean Owl? Possibly because he could do a really good impression of an owl. Really? That's what we're going with? Owls? Just because this guy can do an impression of one? Hit him with it, Jean. Hoot, hoot. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. The Chouannerie
I'm pretty sure that's not how it actually went.
uprising lasted all the way until 1800. In the summer of 1793, the southern city of Toulon invited the British Navy over for some tea and crumpets. And then they asked if they'd possibly like to stay and occupy the city. Being an important naval base, this was a heavy blow to the Republic, who sent a relatively unknown young captain by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte to help stage a siege of the city. Toulon was recaptured by France in the winter, and
Okay, we just yesterday did a epic history video on the Siege of Toulon. So if you want to know more about that, check out the link down below. What he said there is essentially correct. However, it's kind of misleading in that it's France versus Britain. Britain is actually, the British forces include Spanish and other forces as well. It's not all just British.
for his service, Napoleon was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General. The most infamous counter-revolution,
hooray.
however, occurred in the Vendée region. Throughout 1793, revolutionary forces clashed with the region's Catholic and Royal Army. The Republic defeated the counter-revolution through cruel pacification. In particular, General Jean-Baptiste Carrier committed brutal atrocities. In one instance, he had thousands of civilians, priests, women, and children tied to ships, which were then sunk. Carrier would later be found guilty of war crimes and executed. Back in Paris, the government was still dominated by moderates. With the war going badly, revolts in the provinces, and the economy getting worse, it seemed the government just wasn't doing a very good job. Radicals' fear for the safety of the revolution intensified, and Marat even began calling for the moderates in the government to be executed. In return, the moderates called for the arrest of Marat. This led to a chain of events with the two sides in heated conflict. Robespierre declared the Jacobins to be an insurrection and called on the people to arm themselves. It all ended on the 31st of May 1793, with the National Convention surrounded by radical sans-culottes and 29 moderate Girondin politicians arrested. From this moment on, the moderates ceased to be a political force. Robespierre and his radicals would be in almost total control of the government.
And having radicals in control is almost never a good thing.
Brings us to the story of a woman named Charlotte Corday.
Oh, yeah.
Charlotte lived in the northwest city of Caen, and like many in the area, was horrified at the rapid radicalization and increasing violence of the revolution. And the man she blamed more than anyone was Jean-Paul Marat. She wanted to bring peace back to France, and so she did something drastic. She traveled to Paris and told Marat she had a list of enemies for him to publish in his paper. Marat eagerly invited her in for a meeting. So where's that list of enemies you promised me? Here it is. Wait a minute, this isn't a list of enemies. It just says, yippee-ki-yay. And just like that, Marat was no more.
Yep.
Charlotte was quickly arrested and sent to the guillotine. Her dream of restoring peace, however, died with her. Marat became a martyr. In temples of reason, symbols of the dead Marat became the new crucifix. In death, he became an even more powerful inspiration for the extreme levels of violence that were about to rip throughout the new republic. And that's right, here comes
That's actually a pretty good Star Wars reference there. You strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Yeah, they made a martyr of him. That can and does happen. That's why you have to kind of be careful about who you kill in circumstances like this.
the Reign of Terror. If you thought this revolution already sounds pretty violent, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, son. The radicals were now in control, and they believed not only was France surrounded by foreign enemies, but that within the masses, there were also plenty of internal ones too. Individuals not loyal to the revolution, conspiring to bring about its downfall. Robespierre and the rest of the radical faction were having none of it. A new Committee of Public Safety was established with 12 members. Its purpose was to protect the new French Republic from its enemies, and it basically became a 12-man dictatorship with Robespierre as its leading voice. The Revolutionary Tribunal was also reinstated, a special court created to streamline the process of trying suspected enemies and handing out their death sentences. With these two new institutions, Robespierre wanted to scare France's enemies straight.
That's an important thing to understand is, I think sometimes we get this impression that a lot of these executions were just grabbing people off the street and executing them. They did have trials. I won't comment on how fair they may have been, but they did get pulled in front of courts.
September 1793, it was announced that terror would be the order of the day. In other words, fear had become official government policy. And from then onwards, we enter into the period known as the Reign of Terror. Spies and secret police were everywhere and watched the people closely. France's public had to be extremely careful what they said and how they behaved. Obviously, criticizing this new system, or the government, would quickly have you sent off to the guillotine. But that's not all. Even the most minor offense could have you tried before the Revolutionary Tribunal. Hello, Citizen Martin. Hello, Monsieur Dubois. Monsieur? Did I just hear you say Monsieur? That's the old style of address, my friend. To the guillotine! You know what? I didn't like him, but I do feel kinda bad for the king and his family. Oof, expressing sympathy for the royal family, are we? To the guillotine! 12 sous for a loaf of bread? That's way overpriced. To the guillotine, man. And this bread line is taking forever.
Just a second.
To the guillotine!
Yeah, something that they didn't mention that might be interesting to some people is during the period you did have price fixing, government price fixing. They actually had what's called, I believe, the law of the maximums, where they set maximum prices for a lot of essential goods in order to basically control the market, ensure prices stay below a certain point. But that causes problems as well. So what he's talking about here, though, is, the Reign of Terror. We've seen this multiple times in history where this kind of thing happens. And this is just a larger scale version of what happened in places like Salem, Massachusetts, or during the Red Scare, both the first one and the second Great Red Scare here in the United States, where you have a government that is cracking down on people suspected of whatever, whether it's witchcraft, whether it's treason, whether it's royal sympathies, whatever. They're cracking down hard on that, so the people on the ground have an opportunity to take advantage of this. You don't like your neighbor? He's against the government. He said, I heard him say he wished King Louis was still in charge. It's the same thing that happened in Salem, where you could just turn in your neighbors for being a witch. Same thing that happened in the Red Scare. I always want to say Red Square. Red Scare, where you could turn in your neighbor for being a communist or anybody you don't like. It happened here as well. Don't like this guy over here, you just turn him in as a traitor, as somebody who is speaking out against the government. It's a very dangerous time to be alive. And it's a very dangerous time to really trust anybody, because anybody can turn on you.
And you look like you're thinking anti-revolutionary thoughts. To the guillotine. Max, we're sending way too many people to the guillotine. To the guillotine! Chop, 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 chop. It was insane. All across France, about 40,000 people were killed for suspected crimes against liberty.
That number, you hear that thrown around a lot, and it could be accurate, or at least ballpark, but as far as I know, confirmed deaths, the ones that we actually have documented, closer to around 17,000.
Let's say your neighbor won't stop mowing the lawn at 7 in the morning. Well, then all you gotta do is tell the government they've been talking smack about the revolution, and there's a good chance they'll end up in front of the Revolutionary Tribunal. Maybe they'll even be executed, taking a metaphorical load off your shoulders and a literal one off theirs. The most prominent victim of the Reign of Terror was a certain Marie Antoinette, who was finally tried and found guilty of treason in 1793. She expected she'd be brought to the guillotine in a royal carriage.
Is that another Star Wars reference? It is, isn't it? Not an AT-AT, is it? I think it is. Gotta
Fit
be.
for a queen, all the Republic could provide for her, however, was a wooden tumbril. At 37 years old, the most hated woman in French history met her end on the 16th of October, 1793. Robespierre had saved the revolution through terror. Internal dissent was being suppressed. The food situation was no longer quite as bad. Even the French military had got its act together again and pummeled the Allies at the Battle of Fleurus. For Danton and his followers, the time was right to try to normalize the French Republic. Hey Robespierre, so we were thinking that since things are finally going better, maybe we should rein in the terror. And while we're on it, we could possibly start taking it easier on the church. And also try to end this costly war. Oh, crap. As time went on, Robespierre seemed to go, for lack of a better term, a bit mental. He was hell-bent on creating what he called a republic of virtue. And for him, this meant amping up the bloodshed even more. Throughout the spring and summer of 1794, executions reached an unprecedented level during a period known as the Great Terror. Even those closest to him found their way to the guillotine if they dared oppose his ideas and actions, and he began alienating himself from the rest of the convention. He created a new deistic religion called the Cult of the Supreme Being, along with the new annual Festival of the Supreme Being. Man, I think Robespierre is really starting to lose it. He thinks he's a god or something. Nonsense. Sure, he's gone a little extreme, but he doesn't think he's a god. My children, bathe your immortal souls in the virtue of my republic. Okay, yeah, he's completely lost it. Robespierre's ultimate mistake, however, came on July 26th, when he made a speech to the National Convention, in which he said this: I have in my hand a brand new list of enemies to be sent to the guillotine, and many of you are on this list.
That is a direct parallel to McCarthy. That's how McCarthy started the Red Scare. I've got a list of known communists in the State Department. He never shares it, but he waves it around saying he's got it. And that terrifies a lot of people, and it gets them, looking at McCarthy sideways. Same thing's happening here. Great, you're threatening us directly. We're going to do something about it.
But I'm not going to tell you who yet. What do you think of that? I think we should send Robespierre to the guillotine first. All in favor? Oh, no. 2 days later, Robespierre became the final victim of the monstrous terror and paranoia he had created. Many historical accounts of the revolution end here with the death of Robespierre and his terror. But the revolution officially continued for another 5 years, until 1799. So what happened between now and then? Well, after the fall of Robespierre, a more moderate political group called the Thermidorians took control of the convention. They wanted to restore stability to the government. Now, Robespierre's allies and other radicals who had fueled the terror themselves became the target of political suppression. Bourgeois street fighters took on the radical sans-culottes in the streets during a period named the White Terror. In 1795, the Thermidorians drafted a new constitution and created a government called the Directory, with the purpose of preventing power from being able to fall into the hands of a single individual again. As this new government was being established, royalists who wanted to bring the monarchy back to France saw this moment as an opportunity to strike. They staged an insurrection in Paris and battled with the National Guard in the streets. Luckily, one Napoleon Bonaparte happened to be in Paris at the time, and he took control of the situation, firing on the crowd and putting down the insurrection. From this moment on, the people of Paris would never again be able to stage a popular uprising and lost their control over the revolution. For his actions, Napoleon became a general and was sent to take control of the French armies in Italy. The new Directory remained a fairly ineffective government for the remainder of the revolution. It was plagued with corruption and struggled to keep the economy afloat, and as a result, wasn't very popular. For the people of France, with the strict social customs of both royalist France and the terror gone, they didn't really know what to do with themselves. Men no longer removed their hats when talking to women. Different classes began intermingling, and a publication began circulating that looked a lot like a modern dating app. It was social anarchy. Outside of France, the war continued. In 1795, France took the Netherlands, where they set up a puppet state. Then they negotiated both Prussia and Spain out of the war. The British attempted to land French royalists in the west to reinforce rebellion, but that plan failed. In 1796, the French planned a three-pronged attack with the aim of marching on Vienna and knocking Austria out of the war. The two northern armies were defeated and forced to retreat. However, Napoleon in the south, with groundbreaking military strategy, won battle after battle after battle. He pushed the Austrians out of Italy and began closing in on Vienna. The Austrians freaked out, and Napoleon oversaw the signing of a peace treaty. He had almost single-handedly knocked Austria out of the war. And by the way, he was only 28, so maybe it's about time you moved out of your mom's basement. Napoleon became a famed hero among the French people, but his aspirations were still higher. He briefly went off to Egypt and discovered a bunch of gnarly Egyptian stuff, but then the British destroyed his
That includes the Rosetta Stone, which you saw there.
fleet and trapped his forces. Say, Napoleon, sir, you're not going to leave us here stuck in Egypt and return to France, are you? Nonsense, my boy. I would never dream of abandoning my loyal soldiers. Wow, what's that over there? On his return to Paris, Napoleon found himself to be extremely popular, and the government extremely unpopular, and he started getting some power-hungry ideas. Conveniently, a politician named Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès approached Napoleon and said, "Hey man, since you're so popular, do you want to help me stage a coup?" "Great idea. Let's stage a coup, and then I'll coup you." What? Napoleon, with the help of his politician brother, entered the government chamber, possibly got punched
Yeah, he had a brother on the directory.
in the face, and finally his troops intimidated the council to dissolve the government and create a new constitution that basically made Napoleon a dictator. So there you have it, the French Revolution,
All right.
born with the great promise of liberty and equality. The common people dared challenge an oppressive system that had existed for centuries. But
They
before they knew
dared.
it, they found liberty sidelined by terror, equality that possibly didn't quite hit the mark, and an absolute monarchy
Wait a minute.
sidelined by terror, equality that possibly didn't quite hit the mark.
To be fair,
They found
neither did the
liberty
United
sidelined by
States.
terror, equality that
I love the voting booth. But yeah, the rights of man did not include women. In fact, there was a popular work written, The Rights of Women, objecting to this. It is also, I believe, just like in early United States, there are property requirements to vote, so on and so forth. Things do change, at least in the United States, over time. I'm not as familiar with how they evolve in France. But yeah, they both start from fairly similar positions in terms of women's rights, the rights of the landless people.
possibly didn't quite hit the mark, and an absolute monarchy replaced by an absolute dictator. Napoleon began stabilizing French society. He restored the Catholic Church and got rid of that crazy calendar, among other things. But he remained ever ambitious. He was France's first consul, but he slept soundly at night dreaming of being something even bigger. Napoleon's expansionist aspirations, combined with the ongoing conflict in Europe, would eventually lead the continent into a huge conflict known today as
Yeah, coming soon. Starting next week, in fact. All right, so we're done there. Didn't add as much as I had hoped I'd be able to. And I have to apologize. I had to pause a couple times. I got a wee bit of a cold starting up again. We've had stormy weather every few days, and I got pretty wet and miserable a couple days ago. So I've got a little bit of a sore throat. I got a little bit of a sneeze, a little bit of cough. So hopefully that didn't disrupt things too badly. I hope I was able to contribute a little bit. But again, this is just not a period and a place that I know a lot about. So thank you for joining me in any case. We will continue next week with the Napoleonic Wars by Oversimplified, and every Friday. If you're interested in Napoleon, check out our 28 plus episode run through Epic History's Napoleon. Started yesterday, and it'll go through until we get through a bulk of their videos. So those of you who love Napoleon, it's a good time to be on this channel. For the rest of the week, I will be trying to do what I always do, which is look for videos that cover a wide variety of times, places, and peoples. I'm trying not to get too focused on any one particular time or place. I do tend to hit Russia pretty heavily because that's an area I know a lot about, and because I get a lot of people asking me to speak more about Russia. But I do want to especially look at other parts of the world, other cultures, other time periods. I've had requests for Korea, so I'm hoping to get something on Korea in the next week or two. And yeah, again, channel's getting bigger. If you want to make requests, now is the time to do it before it gets a little too big for me to do everybody's request. Now's a great time to toss something down in the comments if you want to see a specific time period, person, religion, culture, country, whatever. Give me a suggestion. I'll see what I can do about it. Fair enough? Sounds good. See you all next time. Bye-bye.